Hi, I'm Kristy. Welcome to Weird and Witchy Shit, a place for, well, weird and witchy shit. Here we talk about everything from the magic of yoga, rituals, tarot, crystals, astrology, self-love, mental health, spiritual stuff, spooky things, and anything of the mystical variety. So if that sounds like the kind of shit you're into, then you're in the right place, my friend. Welcome to the coven. Hi Barbie. So today we are talking about the Fox sisters, who are big movers and shakers when it came to... Why did I say big movers and shakers? I've never in my life said big movers and shakers. The Fox sisters were really the thing that kind of kicked off the spiritualism movement of the 19th century. We have spoke a fair bit about spiritualism on the podcast before, in both the exorcism of Roland Doe and weirdness of the Ouija, but for context today, it is important that we kind of briefly revisit it again. So spiritualism was a social religious movement that held beliefs about us humans maintaining our awareness after death. So in afterlife we still go on. Death isn't the end, and really death is just the next step in the evolutionary process. And not only that, but that we can communicate back and forward with these spirits. This can be loved ones, spirit guides, Elvis, I don't know, whoever you want to contact. And the reason basically in the spiritualism movement that you would want to contact somebody who's died is pretty much either one, because they were someone who you loved and you missed them and you want to talk to them again, and two, because they're at the next step of the evolutionary process, then they could offer us a lot of insight and wisdom as to what the future and death holds for us. Also, people would seek spiritual guidance from spirit guides, people they've known, or just what they would consider to be like higher beings. And this is still practiced even today, like when people go to mediums or psychics, or they use Ouija boards or host seances, that kind of thing. Of course there are many skeptics in the world, but there are also many people who entirely believe that this communication with spirits is entirely possible. Some people hold the belief that everyone is born with this kind of sixth sense, and maybe we just block it off as we get older. And some people believe that only a few people are born with these gifts. And then there's the ones who also believe that this is all just a bunch of bullshit. Mediums, psychics, and anybody claiming that they can connect with the spirit realm is just basically a con artist. And that moves us nicely onto the topic of today, the Fox sisters. I also just have to apologise because there's lots of noise going on outside my window. Someone sounds like they're drilling or something. I can't really do anything about it. I'm hoping that the microphone doesn't pick that up. I've closed my windows, I've put my blinds down. Other than that, I can't really go out and tell them to shut the fuck up as much as I would like to. So let me take you way back to the Victorian era in 1848, where two sisters, Margaretta Fox, known as Maggie, age 14, and her younger sister, Catherine Fox, known as Kate, age 11, lived in Hydesville, New York City with their mum and dad, Margaret and John. They also had an older sister, Leah, but she was already married and had moved out of the family home. Her name was now Leah Fish, and why she went from a fox to a fish, I don't know. That's none of my business and it's not relevant. And who is also not really relevant is that they had a brother called David, but he doesn't really come up in this story. Basically, they're everything and he's just David. When Maggie and Kate were in their bed at night, strange noises started to happen, and if you watched the episode on the exorcism of Roland Doe, you know that when strange noises start happening in a child's bedroom, shit's about to go down. Although, to be fair, my mum has been in her house for like well over 30 years now, and there's always been noises in her house. Like from I was a child, like I always remember sounding like the toilet was flushing upstairs when nobody was up there. You would hear footsteps walking about. Sometimes you can hear as if it sounds like somebody's rolling a bowling ball. What do you say that? A bowling ball. Oh my god, I'm so sleep deprived. It sounds like somebody's rolling like a bowling ball across the floor, but nobody's upstairs, so. Oh my god, even one time a candle turned itself on, like no joke. Like I went into the bathroom to like wash my hands and there was a candle that had recently just been lit, and it was just me and my mum in the house. My mum never ever burns candles because she's like quite paranoid about a fire starting, and this candle had lit itself completely upstairs in the bathroom. Me and my mum were both downstairs in the living room for the few hours before it, and you could tell that the candle had just been lit because like not a lot of the wax had been melted. There was like the tiniest little of like wax gone. It was weird. I claim ghosts, however I digress. When Kate and Maggie were in bed at night, these loud noises known as rappings would happen. And these rappings were loud enough not only for the girls to hear, but for their parents to hear in the next room. This would go on for several nights, and not only was the family hearing these rappings while the girls and their mum were out and about and they bumped into one of the neighbours. He had commented how he could hear these strange rapping noises through the walls at night time, and wondered if anyone knew what it was. So they all decided this was pretty strange because they couldn't quite figure out exactly where the noise came from, so they all went into the Fox home to see if they could try and locate where this kind of rapping noise was coming from. And this is where they all realised that these rappings weren't just random spontaneous noises, but they were precise noises that were directly linked to like questions being asked. Basically, they were like a form of communication. So it wasn't just like, oh, random rap here, there, everywhere. It became like they could ask rap 5 times and there would be 5 loud rappings, and then rap 10 times and there'd be 10 loud rappings, and so on and so forth. And then they started to play about and wonder if they could ask more kind of questions and receive answers through these noises. So they asked, what age is our neighbour? And from there, 33 rappings happened, one after the other, and the guy was 33. From then on, the girls, along with their mum, began to develop a system so that the rapping could be a little bit more specific, as in asking more specific questions and getting more specific answers. So they could ask yes or no questions, like do it twice for yes, once for no. And then they came up with a system where they associated different letters of the alphabet with different numbers. I'm going to assume A is 1, B is 2, so on and so forth. And they were very quickly convinced that this was communication with the spirit realm, because for them there seemed to be no other explanation. Invisible thing, noises coming from nowhere, some sort of weird communication. It's the Victorian era, everything's just a little bit creepy. Of course, that's the conclusion that you would jump to. And the girls came up with a nickname for this spirit. They called him Mr. Splitfoot, which was a nickname for the devil. So they were really going for this kind of like fear factor here. And the more communication that they had with the raps, the more a story started to unfold that this spirit wasn't actually the devil, but it was that of a peddler who had been murdered and buried in the cellar of that house before it had been their home. And actually, Years later, in 1904, when a false well had fell down into the ground, they actually found bones in that very cellar. After all this happened, Kate and Maggie were very briefly split up from one another and sent to live in Rochester. So Kate went with their sister Leah and Maggie went with David. I'm not absolutely certain why they were split up. I wonder if it was just to kind of see if these noises in the communication with the spirit followed them as they were separated, as in are you just kind of being pranksters when you're together? Let's see what happens when you're away from each other. And also there could have been an element of wondering if this was a poltergeist, like we spoke about in the Roland Doe episode. Oftentimes a poltergeist is a type of energetic being or spirit, but it normally resides in a home. So if you leave the area, it normally won't follow you there. It will normally stay isolated to that one specific place. So maybe they were trying to rule out if this was a poltergeist. But anyway, these mysterious rappings continued to follow both the girls when they were separate. Amy and Isaac Post, who were family friends to the Foxes, became very interested in all these spooky goings on. They were a radical Quaker couple, and I genuinely had no idea what a Quaker was. But according to Wikipedia, it is: Quakers are people who belong to a historically Protestant Christian set of denominations known as the Religious Society of Friends. Members of these movements, the Friends, are generally united by a belief in each human's ability to experience the light within, or answering that of God in everyone. Is that a cult? So Amy and Isaac invite both of the girls over to their home one night and are immediately taken in by them and this phenomenon. And they were completely certain in the genuineness of it all, especially when whatever it was they were communicating with started to answer questions for them. They were like, okay, this does seem legit. So they spread the word out to all of their Quaker pals, and then they became interested in the girls and they really believed in the girls, and this is what started the very early days of the spiritualism movement. This then led to the girls demonstrating their talents at the Corinthian Hall in Rochester on the 14th of November 1849 in what would be the very first spiritualism demonstration held for a paying audience. And their older sister Leah would act as a chaperone for the girls because of course they were only 14 and 11 at the time, so she was there to be looking after them but also acting as kind of like their manager as well. And this first public demonstration was really just the beginning for the girls, because word started to quickly spread and more people wanted to see this firsthand, because this kind of public performance of contacting the dead hadn't really been seen before on such a big scale like this. So basically it snowballed and snowballed until the girls became pretty much of celebrity status. In listening to this might seem ridiculous if you're thinking about it in the context of these times, but remembering that this was 1849 and I think people were a lot more, I guess a lot more gullible, and on a level I guess a lot more religious than the majority of people are now. Obviously religion is huge, but I guess back then religion was such a huge role in most people's lives, and yeah, I think people probably weren't as skeptical as people today are now. And like I said, this was kind of the first time that this had been done. Obviously nowadays, even if you, like I do, believe in communication with the dead, you believe that there is like real genuine mediums out there, you probably know that a huge portion of the people telling you that they are like a psychic medium or can contact the dead, you probably know that a lot of them are scam artists, because we've seen it time and time and time again, these people not being very genuine at all. But at this time, I guess they were just taken more at face value by these real big believers who were wanting to believe in something a lot more. And I have like experienced this myself. I've been to mediums for private readings and for group readings, and I've been to most private readings I feel like are, yeah, I've been to some that are like bad. Most I've been to have been okay. I'd say 2 have been great, and yeah, there has been some bad ones, but the group ones, the ones where it's like I'm sensing, you know, like Lemmy when he's like in like his Raymond Day vibe, like I'll leave the love with you. Like I feel like that's been like mostly my experience of mediums. But I have been there for some group settings where the medium has said things, and to some people that's like, it seems like that would be like very, very difficult to know, like such like niche little things that wouldn't just be something that you would just randomly guess about someone or say with absolute certainty to someone in the audience, like, I know X, Y, and Z. I know when you were 11 years old, this happened when you were at your grand's house, who stayed in this place, who overlooked this, like, and like some of it has been very, very specific. But on the flip side, I have been to some mediums where it literally is like a fucking shit show, and it's like, does anybody know somebody called John? And it's like, bitch, everybody knows somebody called John. Like in these ones, yeah, I think that there's a mix out there. But remember as well, like a lot of people nowadays and then who go to mediums are, some people are going for fun, and some people are going because they're deep in grief and they're deep in desperation to be able to communicate with like their loved one. So they might be very quick to jump on if somebody's like, does somebody know someone called Maggie and their mum was Molly, and they're like, no, are you sure it's Maggie and not something else? No, it could be something else with an M. It's Mandy, Millie, Molly. Being like, oh my god, like, and then just being so like thrilled that like your mum has came through to you and you're getting to like communicate with your dead mum, that you kind of overlook all the big huge red flags. And I think probably there was an element of that back then as well, and also just that people were a lot more gullible, less skeptical, less critical thinking going on. Listen, all I'm saying is now people are a lot more savvy and a lot less amazed by these types of things. Back then, people had fuck all else to do but to just get scurvy and die. So the people attending these seances weren't all just like regular people, but word had started to spread among the leading literary and scholarly minds of their time, and the girls soon became acquainted with Horace Greeley, who was a publisher and politician who put them in touch with more upper class circles. So they started performing for more elite members of society, you could say. And not before too long, Kate, Maggie and Leah were touring around, putting on showings 3 times a day, one at 10 a.m, one at 5 p.m, and one at 8 p.m, for $1 a show, and upwards of 30 people would show up to each showing. So like I said, people for the most part were eating this up and all about it. But of course, there are always going to be some critics. These people who do have their critical thinking cap on, and these people soon started to realise that the wrappings would disappear and wouldn't happen if something as simple as a cushion was placed under the girl's feet. Very suspicious. What does that mean? Well, some investigators started to suspect that these exact rapping noises could be replicated by cracking joints, such as toe joints on rickety ass wooden floors. No, I'm not kidding. It was reported that the sounds had been coming from nearby the girls as opposed to like in the walls and further away. And one of the professors who was part of this kind of skeptical investigation said that they had felt pulsations in Margaret's foot. However, Kate was later investigated by William Crookes, who was a very prominent physicist of the time, and he actually concluded that the raps were entirely genuine. But he was described as gullible, and loads of other mediums that he had inspected and says were genuine had then later on been found out for using trickery and being fake. So take his opinion with a pinch of salt. And it was round about this point when the girls were still incredibly young, and they had obviously a lack of parental supervision mixed with the overnight fame and success and putting on all these shows led to them drinking wine and drinking quite a bit of wine. And yes, of course, their sister was supervising them, and I was going to say she was supervising them, but not well. But I feel like maybe that's harsh because I have a son who's 15, and I know like if a teenager's going to do something, they're going to fucking do it whether you're like telling them not to or not. So, but anyway, like all I'm saying is I'm not judging, but anyway, the girls started to drink very heavily and become quite dependent on alcohol. At the height of the Fox sisters' fame in 1853, there was even a song out called Spirit Rappings, and not gonna lie, it actually kind of bangs. Sheet music for this is available online, and if I was in any way musical, I would play it for you, but I am not. But I did find a YouTube video of someone who is playing the music, so I will leave that link in the description box below for the instrumental version. And for the lyrics, I will read, not sing, for your own benefit. Softly, softly, hear the rustle of the spirit's airy wings. They are coming down to mingle once again with earthly things. With their rapping and their tapping, rap tap tap to wake or napping, in the restless dream of error, hear the weird the spirit brings. Rap tap tap, lost friends are near you, rap tap tap, they see and hear you. In their mystic converse rappy, they declare good spirits happy, they declare good spirits happy. Gently, gently, they are timid. If a medium is not there, they may leave you in delusion and dissolve again to air. 'Tis no fable, beings able, rap tap tap upon a table. And their language is translated while they watch with guardian care. Rap tap tap, lost friends are near you, rap tap tap, they see and hear you. In their mystic converse rappy, they declare good spirits happy. They declare good spirits happy. And while this joint fame for the girls worked well for a while, eventually the two girls did end up parting ways and kind of getting on with their own life a little bit. So in 1852, Maggie met and married Elijah Kane, who was an Arctic explorer, and he was absolutely certain that Kate and her sister were full of shit and scam artists, and he wanted her to give up spiritualism for him. He asked her to, and I quote, give up her life of dreary sameness and suspected deceit, which she did and then converted to Catholicism. I don't know why I always try and say that word. She then became a Catholic. Unfortunately, Elijah died only 5 years later in 1887, and Maggie went straight back into mediumship. While deep in mourning for her late husband, Maggie started to lean very, very heavily on alcohol. Meanwhile, Kate's career in spiritualism continued. She moved to England in 1872 and she ended up marrying a London barrister who was also a spiritualist as well, and they had 2 children to each other while she kept working away and developing her psychic abilities even more. It's said that she could even communicate 2 messages simultaneously, so she could write one message while speak another message, and she even used blank cards which words would spontaneously appear upon. And her business was booming. Not only was she working with wealthy, affluent clients, but she was also summoning the likes of Benjamin Franklin during her seances. But over the course of time, the spiritualism movement had grown exponentially, and people's expectations were getting higher and higher. I mean, sure, maybe like a decade or 2 ago, some rappings in the walls or on the floors would have been enough to spook people, but people were getting used to it now. They wanted more. They wanted apparitions to show up in front of them. They wanted Ben Frank to be rocking up at every single seance, and they just kind of wanted more and more and more, and that was a lot of pressure for Kate. And not only that, but Kate's husband also died in 1881. This left her to be a single mother to 2 sons, and much like her sister Maggie, she became incredibly dependent on alcohol. By this time, Maggie had moved over to England to be with Kate, and both suffering from alcoholism. They also both started to develop a very deep anger for their older sister Leah. Not only did they feel like she took advantage of them when they were younger and supposed to be under her guardianship, she was supposed to be looking after them, but they were kind of just thrust into this world of spiritualism and celebrity at a young age, and they viewed it as Kate doing that so that she could make money off them, not really taking in what effect it might have on them giving up their youth and their life to live this life. Basically, they felt like they were pawns for Leah so that she could make money off them while they were too young and in a vulnerable position to actually fully comprehend what that lifestyle would be. And at the time, technically they did like consent to doing all these tours and stuff, but they were very young. They were 14 and 11, so really the responsibility does fall on the adults in their life, because if you're responsible for a child, then you're responsible for putting their best interests at heart. And you still see it all the time to this day, from like child stars on like Disney to even like YouTube family channels, where children can be they can have this kind of talent or this kind of money maker, whether it be dance or acting or a beautiful singing voice or whatever, or like being able to contact spirits, and the adults in their life kind of zone in on that and see that as like a big kind of flashing dollar sign. Not saying that's absolutely what happened with Leah, but I think people's judgment can get clouded when money becomes involved. And now Maggie and Kate were kind of starting to realise this now that their lives were in tatters and they were both alcoholics. So Leah and some other friends who had become kind of leaders in the spiritualism movement were being real dickheads to Kate and telling her that because she was an alcoholic, she wasn't able to look after her 2 kids, and she wasn't a very good mum, and like, just, you know, not great. Like, exact details of the fight are kind of unknown, but it must have been pretty serious because it caused quite a huge rift. So huge, in fact, that Maggie decided that she was going to go public. She was not only going to out herself, she was going to out her sister Kate, her older sister Leah, and she was going to out the spiritualism movement as a fraud. October 21st, 1888, in an interview with New York World, Maggie said, "My sister Katie and myself were very young children when this horrible deception began. At night when we went to bed, we used to tie an apple on a string and move the string up and down, causing the apple to bump on the floor. Or we would drop the apple on the floor, making a strange noise every time it would rebound. A great many people, when they hear the rapping, imagine at once that the spirits are touching them. It's a very common delusion. Some very wealthy people came to see me some years ago when I lived in 42nd Street, and I did some rappings for them. I made the spirit rap on the chair, and one of the ladies cried out, 'I feel the spirit tapping me on the shoulder.' Of course, that was pure imagination." And later that night, she demonstrated to a live audience of 2,000 people exactly how she created these raps by cracking her big toe on a wooden stool. Working her big toe and solemnly declaring that it was in this way that she created the excitement that had driven so many persons to suicide or insanity. One moment it was ludicrous, the next it was weird. Maggie also said, "My sister Katie was the first to observe that by swishing her fingers she could produce certain noises with her knuckles and joints, and that same effect could be made with the toes. Finding that we could make raps with our feet, first with one foot and then with both, we practiced until we could do this easily when the room was dark." She also exposed her sister Leah for apparently knowing all along that the girls were being deceptive and that the raps weren't communication from the spirit realm. She said that Leah absolutely knew that this was fake when she took them on tour. Meanwhile, Kate sat in the crowd nodding along in agreement that Leah had exploited both her younger sisters to make money from them. And before exiting the stage, she thanked God that she was able to expose spiritualism for the fraud that it was. And then this was referred to as the death blow to the spiritualism movement. It would probably be a good time for me to mention that the bones that I said that were found in the cellar of the Fox house in 1904, because, well, you might be thinking, oh, there was bones, so there might have been like a spirit in their house. It was actually proven just to be a prank, and although there were some like bigger bones down there, they were also found amongst like chicken bones and stuff. So yeah, prob's a prank. Probably someone had just put them there to scare local children, because the Fox sisters' former house had kind of become known as like the local spook house. And you'd think that that would be the end of it, but you would be wrong, because only 1 year later, Maggie actually retracted her statement and said that her confession was completely false and that her spirit guides had told her to make this confession, but that it actually wasn't true. So then she tried to go back to mediumship, but she wasn't very successful because nobody could trust her, and I think we know why. This, of course, caused a lot of confusion and criticism. Many believe that she went back on her original statement because the $1,500 that she'd been paid for it had run out and she wanted to make more money now. But some believed that she was telling the truth now, and the reason that she said that the reason that she said that it had all been fake all along is because her career hadn't, like Maggie's career hadn't really been like very successful, and she couldn't make a lot of money off of mediumship, so she instead became spiritualism's biggest critic, because that's kind of where the money was. I mean, in my opinion, like I said, I believe in mediums. I believe that you can contact the dead. But personally, with the Fox sisters, I just think this was a hoax that went a little bit too far. But what we can say for the Fox sisters, hoax or no hoax, if it hadn't been for them, just two little girls in their bedroom playing a prank on their mum during the night, like many children do, where would spiritualism be today? If you'd like to continue the conversation, you can get me on Instagram at kristys_coven. That's KRISTYS_coven. You can also find me on YouTube at Kristys Coven, where I post a lot of free yoga classes and shit like that. And I'd love to have you join, because it's not a coven if it's just me. And until next time, bye!